The woman in the pale blue waitress uniform froze in the middle of the five-star restaurant, holding a tray of lemon water like it had suddenly become too heavy for her hands. Around her, rich guests laughed beneath crystal chandeliers, forks touched porcelain plates, and sunlight poured through the tall windows like gold. But at table 7, the most powerful man in the city looked up at her with tired eyes and said the one sentence no one expected. He said he knew she was not his date, but asked her to stay until dessert. For a moment, the whole room seemed to pause. Her name was Mireya Vale, and she was used to being invisible. People saw the uniform before they saw her face. They saw the cheap shoes, the tired smile, the careful way she carried herself so no one could tell how badly her feet hurt after 10-hour shifts. They did not see the woman who had once dreamed of becoming a pastry chef, the woman who fed her little brother before feeding herself, the woman who cried quietly in the laundry room of her apartment building because rent was late again. And now, standing beside one of the wealthiest CEOs in the country, she felt every eye in the restaurant turning toward her as if she had committed a crime by being noticed. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that can happen when one person refuses to look away, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Hub. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the smallest act of compassion can change a life forever. The CEO's name was Callaway Voss, founder of Voss Meridian Hotels, a man whose face appeared on magazine covers beside words like empire, genius, and billionaire. But that bright afternoon, he looked nothing like the smiling photographs. He sat alone at a table reserved for two, wearing a charcoal suit and a silver watch that probably cost more than Mireya's yearly income. Across from him was an empty chair, untouched silverware, and a wilting white rose placed there by the restaurant for romance. His actual date had not come. Worse, Mireya had overheard the hostess whispering that the woman had arrived, seen Callaway through the glass, received a phone call, and left without entering. Everyone thought he had been rejected. Mireya had only approached to refill his glass. She asked if he needed anything else, keeping her voice gentle because loneliness had a shape, and she recognized it. Callaway looked at her name tag, then at the tray in her hands, and asked if she had ever eaten the restaurant's famous apricot dessert. She nearly laughed from shock. Employees were not allowed to taste anything unless it was broken, burned, or left behind. She told him politely that she was not his date. She was only serving his table. That was when he asked her to stay until dessert. Her manager, Mr. Keene, saw it from across the room and stiffened like a man watching money walk toward disaster. Mireya felt panic rise in her throat. She could not afford trouble. She could not afford to lose this job, even if the manager treated her like furniture and scheduled her for double shifts whenever someone else called out. She needed every tip, every hour, every leftover roll she could sneak into her bag for her brother, Tavio, who was 17 and pretending not to worry about college applications because he knew she was already drowning. Callaway seemed to understand her fear without her saying it. He turned slightly and told Mr. Keene that he was requesting her service for the remainder of his meal and that she should be seated, not standing. The manager forced a smile so sharp it looked painful. Mireya sat slowly in the empty chair, her hands folded in her lap, her heart pounding hard enough to shake her ribs. Guests stared. A woman at the next table smirked. Someone whispered that billionaires had strange hobbies. But Callaway did not treat her like a joke. He asked her what her favorite dessert was, not in the careless way rich people sometimes asked questions before forgetting the answer, but like the response mattered. Mireya hesitated, then admitted she used to make guava cream cakes with her mother before the illness took her strength. She told him about the tiny kitchen, the cracked green mixing bowl, the way her mother could turn flour and sugar into something that made neighbors knock on their door. Then she stopped herself, embarrassed by how much she had said. Callaway's expression changed. Not dramatically, not in the way people change when they perform kindness, but softly, like some old locked door inside him had opened. He confessed that his own mother had worked as a hotel maid before he built his company. She had cleaned rooms in buildings where guests never looked her in the eye. He said he still remembered waiting outside staff entrances as a boy, watching her come out with swollen hands and a brave smile. Mireya looked at him then, really looked, and saw that wealth had not erased his loneliness. It had only dressed it better. Their strange lunch continued under the bright afternoon sun. Mireya answered carefully at first, then honestly. She told him she worked 6 days a week, sometimes 7. She told him she loved baking but had sold her mixer to pay for medicine when Tavio got sick last winter. She did not say it to ask for pity. In fact, she hated how vulnerable the truth sounded once spoken aloud. But Calloway listened as if she were not a waitress filling silence, but a person whose story had weight. Then Mr. Keene returned and ruined the fragile warmth. He leaned close to Mireya and said quietly, but not quietly enough, that she needed to remember her place. The words landed like a slap. Mireya's cheeks burned. The table beside them went silent. Calloway set down his fork. His voice remained calm, but something in it turned cold. He asked Mr. Keene what place, exactly, he meant. The manager stumbled, saying he only meant she was on duty. Calloway looked around the restaurant, at the shining floors, the imported flowers, the perfect plates, and said that any establishment that confused service with humiliation did not deserve loyal employees. Mireya wanted to disappear. She had survived by staying quiet. Quiet people kept jobs. Quiet people avoided being punished. Quiet people did not get defended by billionaires in rooms full of witnesses. But for the first time in years, someone had heard the insult that workers swallowed every day and refused to let it pass as normal. When dessert arrived, the famous apricot tart looked like a small piece of sunlight on white porcelain. Calloway pushed the plate gently toward her and asked her to taste it first. Her hands trembled as she lifted the fork. The crust shattered delicately, the cream melted sweet and bright, and suddenly her eyes filled with tears. Not because it was the best dessert she had ever tasted, though it was close, but because it reminded her of her mother standing in their kitchen, laughing with flour on her cheek. It reminded her of who she had been before survival became her whole personality. Calloway noticed the tears and did not embarrass her by pointing them out. Instead, he told her that Voss Meridian was opening a culinary training program for hospitality workers who wanted to grow beyond their current roles. He had funded it after his mother died, but he admitted that in board meetings it had become another polished initiative, another good headline. Sitting across from Mireya, he realized he had forgotten the faces it was supposed to serve. Mireya shook her head before he could offer anything. Pride rose in her like armor. She said she was not a charity case. Calloway nodded. He said he was not offering charity. He was offering an interview, a chance to compete, and a promise that her current manager would never be allowed to punish her for being seen. That was when Mireya finally understood that the dessert had never been about dessert. He had asked her to stay because he had recognized something broken in both of them. She had reminded him of where he came from, and he had reminded her that her future was not cancelled just because life had been cruel. The days that followed were not magical. Mireya still woke before sunrise. She still rode the bus with aching legs. She still counted coins at the grocery store and told Tavio not to worry when there was every reason to worry. But something inside her had shifted. She applied for the program with a borrowed laptop at the public library, typing her answers slowly because her hands shook with hope. For the required sample recipe, she submitted her mother's guava cream cake, adding a note about how food could make poor people feel rich for 5 minutes and lonely people feel remembered. Mr. Keene tried to make her life difficult after that lunch. He gave her the worst tables, criticized tiny mistakes, and told other employees she thought she was special now. But customers began asking for her by name. Some had witnessed what happened. Others simply noticed the kindness in her service. One elderly man left a note on a receipt saying that dignity was the best thing served in the restaurant that day. Mireya kept that note folded in her wallet beside a photograph of her mother. 3 weeks later, an envelope arrived. Mireya opened it in the hallway of her apartment building because she could not wait until she got upstairs. The letter said she had been accepted into the culinary training program with full support, including a stipend that would allow her to reduce her restaurant hours. She sank onto the steps and cried so hard that Mrs. Alvarez from 3B came out with a broom in her hand, thinking someone had been hurt. In a way, someone had been hurt for years. But now, finally, someone was healing. The training kitchen smelled of butter, citrus, and possibility. Mireya felt out of place on the first day, surrounded by stainless steel counters and students who seemed more confident. But when she touched dough, memory guided her hands. Her mother's voice returned in quiet pieces. Be gentle. Let it rest. Sweetness takes patience. She failed sometimes. Her custard split. Her tart shell burned. One instructor told her that talent mattered, but discipline made it useful. Mireya stayed late to practice until the janitor flicked the lights twice as a warning. Calloway did not hover over her journey. He did not turn her life into a public relations story. But one afternoon, he visited the kitchen during a showcase event. Mireya almost dropped a tray when she saw him standing near the back, wearing no expression of ownership, only quiet pride. Her final dessert was a guava apricot cake, a bridge between her mother's kitchen and the day everything changed. When Calloway tasted it, he closed his eyes for a moment. Then he smiled, and Mireya knew before he spoke that she had done more than bake something good. She had told the truth through sugar, fruit, and memory. Months passed. The restaurant where she once served tables became a place she no longer feared. Mr. Keene was transferred after several employees reported his behavior. Tavio received his college acceptance letter and lifted Mireya off the ground in their tiny kitchen, both of them laughing and crying at once. Their apartment still had old pipes and peeling paint, but now there was a second-hand mixer on the counter, bought with Mireya's first stipend check. Every Sunday, she baked something new, and the hallway filled with neighbors pretending to pass by for no reason. Near the end of the program, Calloway invited Mireya back to the same restaurant, not as staff, not as a rescued woman, not as a symbol, but as the featured pastry chef for a charity luncheon supporting workers in hospitality. It was daytime again. Sunlight poured through the windows just as it had before. But this time, when Mireya entered, she wore a clean white chef's coat with her name embroidered over her heart. The room did not make her shrink. The chandeliers did not intimidate her. She had learned that elegance was not owned by the wealthy. Sometimes it lived in tired hands that kept going. Before dessert was served, Calloway stood and told the guests that leadership was not measured by how many people stood beneath you, but by how many people stood taller because you refused to ignore them. He did not tell Mireya's private struggles. He did not turn her pain into entertainment. He simply introduced her as a chef whose work reminded him that dignity could be restored in the most unexpected places. Mireya stepped forward with a tray of small guava apricot cakes. For one breath, she saw herself as she had been months earlier, standing in the same room with a waitress uniform and a trembling heart, whispering that she was not his date. She remembered how close she had come to walking away. She remembered the empty chair, the untouched rose, the dessert that tasted like her mother's love. Then she looked at Calloway, at Tavio sitting proudly near the front, at Mrs. Alvarez wiping her eyes with a napkin she had definitely stolen for sentimental reasons, and she smiled. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and comment what kindness means to you. Your support helps Kindness Hub bring more emotional stories of compassion, second chances, and quiet heroes to people who may need them most. That afternoon, Mireya served dessert to a room that once would have ignored her. People praised the balance of flavors, the tenderness of the cake, the brightness of the fruit. But the compliment that mattered most came from a little girl at the charity luncheon whose mother worked in housekeeping. The child took one bite, looked up at Mireya, and said it tasted like a hug. Mireya laughed, then turned away quickly because tears were rising again. Please comment stay until dessert if you believe one kind moment can change someone's entire life. Years later, people would ask Mireya when her life changed. They expected her to mention the acceptance letter, the chef's coat, or the day her first bakery opened on a sunny corner with a line stretching down the block. But she always thought back to a quiet afternoon in a restaurant where she felt invisible, where a lonely man with everything recognized a struggling woman with almost nothing, and where a dessert became a doorway. She would say her life changed when someone looked past her uniform and asked her to stay. Not because he needed a date. Not because he wanted applause. But because he understood that sometimes the person serving the table is the one carrying the story everyone needs to hear.